The world is calm. You're walking down the street, a coffee in hand, the distant rumble of traffic humming like background music. Then, without warning, the cup slips. Not because you dropped it, but because gravity itself vanished. The car rolling down the road doesn't roll anymore. It drifts upward like a balloon. People scream as their feet lift off the pavement. Rivers begin to peel away from their beds, lifting like great glass sheets into the air. For 5 eternal seconds, the single invisible force holding our planet together is gone. And then, as suddenly as it disappeared, gravity snaps back. Millions slam into the earth. Oceans crash back into their basins. The world, in those 5 seconds, changes forever. But what exactly would happen if gravity, the most familiar yet mysterious force in the universe, suddenly stopped? For just 5 seconds? What if I told you that 5 seconds is more than enough time to cause chaos on a scale humanity has never witnessed before? Gravity. It's the glue of the cosmos, the unseen hand that pulls everything toward everything else. It keeps our feet planted, the moon in orbit, and the atmosphere wrapped around our fragile planet. Most of us don't think about it unless we trip, fall, or watch an apple tumble from a tree. But remove it, even briefly, and you don't just break the rules of nature. You invite catastrophe. Let's imagine this scenario step by step. The first second, confusion. In the very first second, every loose object not anchored to the ground begins to drift. A pen on a desk, a cat leaping from a chair, a glass of water by the bedside. All of it lifts. At first, people might think it's an earthquake, a prank, or even the end of the world. Imagine standing in Times Square, watching hundreds of people rise together, screaming, clawing at the air like swimmers in an invisible ocean. Air itself would behave differently. The atmosphere is held to Earth by gravity. Without it, the air column begins to expand outward into space. Oxygen molecules scatter, and a vacuum begins to form. You wouldn't suffocate in 5 seconds, but you'd feel your ears pop as pressure drops rapidly. Birds in flight would spin helplessly, wings suddenly meaningless. And if you were in a car? Forget brakes. The car isn't pinned to the road anymore. Both you and the vehicle are adrift, inertia the only law left. The second, escalation. By now, panic has set in. Lakes, rivers, and oceans, no longer tethered, begin to lift. Imagine the Pacific Ocean, 170 million square kilometers, suddenly peeling away, billions of tons of water rising in a shimmering blue wall. Of course, not the entire ocean would drift up at once, but massive sheets of water would detach from the surface. Ships would tumble like toys inside a shaken snow globe. Inside buildings, chaos reigns. Furniture, appliances, even the people themselves float upward, banging into ceilings. Hospitals, schools, offices all turned upside down. Meanwhile, up in space, satellites and the International Space Station would briefly experience chaos of their own. They're in delicate balance between orbital speed and Earth's pull. Remove that pull, and their paths destabilize instantly. The third second, the breaking point. This is when the situation turns deadly. Humans who were outdoors, already floating higher and higher, would now be dozens of feet above the ground. In 5 seconds, with Earth's rotation still hurling everything at 1,000 miles per hour around its axis, people and objects would drift sideways as well as upward. Humor, albeit dark, sneaks in here. If you ever wanted to fly like Superman, congratulations, this is your moment. The problem is, you don't get to land like him. Airplanes in flight, stripped of lift and thrust as the air itself disperses, would spiral unpredictably. Pilots would lose all control, and passengers would float inside cabins screaming as the aircraft tumbles. The fourth second, the silent pause. By the fourth second, the Earth is eerily quiet. Without gravity, sound waves, carried through air, are already weaker as the atmosphere thins. It would feel like a dream, a strange silence swallowing the world. The sky above might begin to shimmer oddly, as air molecules scatter towards space. Even sunlight looks different when the lens of the atmosphere begins to fade. If you were unlucky enough to be outdoors, you're now floating tens of meters above the Earth, staring down in horror at the ground rushing away. Children lose grip on their parents' hands. Dogs drift upward on broken leashes. Entire crowds scatter like dandelion seeds. The fifth second. The return. And then gravity comes back. In an instant, everything that was rising now plummets. People smash into the ground with fatal force. Cars slam down on roads, crumpling like tin cans. Airplanes, already unstable, drop like stones. And the oceans? Billions of tons of displaced water crash back into their basins, sending mega tsunamis roaring toward coastlines. The devastation is incalculable. Even though it lasted only 5 seconds, the damage is global. Cities flood, infrastructure collapses, and millions perish. The science behind it. Now let's ground this thought experiment with facts. Gravity isn't something Earth generates like electricity. It's the warping of space-time itself, caused by mass. Einstein's general theory of relativity describes how the Earth bends the fabric of space, keeping everything bound. To make gravity vanish, you'd need to somehow erase mass itself or untangle space-time. Both are, at least with our current understanding, impossible. But imagining it gone helps us understand how delicate our existence really is. Even 5 seconds without it reveals how much we depend on this invisible force. Real-world comparisons. Consider astronauts in orbit. They live in microgravity, not because gravity disappears, but because they're in constant free fall around Earth. It's a carefully balanced state. Remove Earth's pull entirely, and they wouldn't drift peacefully. They'd shoot straight off into space forever. Or think about the oceans again. When tsunamis strike today, caused by earthquakes or volcanic eruptions, they devastate coastlines in minutes. Now multiply that by the entire world's oceans being lifted and dropped all at once. That's not just a disaster, it's a reset button for civilization. And humor aside, one silver lining. For those 5 seconds, you'd weigh absolutely nothing. No crash diets, no gym memberships. Just don't get too comfortable because when it's over, the scale comes back with a vengeance. Could we survive it? Here's the big question. Would humanity as a whole survive such an event? The answer is grim but not total annihilation. Inland communities might endure, though infrastructure would be wrecked. Survivors would face famine, disease, and the collapse of global systems. It's not an extinction-level event like an asteroid strike, but it would be one of history's greatest disasters. Generations would remember the day the Earth betrayed its own laws. So what do we learn from this impossible scenario? That gravity, silent and invisible, is not just a background character in our lives. It is the stage itself, the framework that makes existence possible. We take it for granted because it never changes, never wavers. But if it did, even for 5 seconds, the world would never be the same again. In the end, this isn't just a story about physics. It's about perspective. Sometimes the most powerful forces in our lives are the ones we never notice until they're gone. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed exploring this strange what if, make sure to like the video, subscribe for more thought-provoking documentaries,